Greetings, friends, and welcome to Captain Samuel's Sam's. I like to try new authors, and the problem is every author has their duds. And if you try one of their dud books first, you might come away with a bad impression of that author. Everybody on BookTube talks about how excellent Roger Zelazny is, and these opinions are coming from booktubers that I really enjoy and really respect. And when I tried Roger Zelazny for the first time with his book Jack of Shadows, I had a negative experience. So today we're going to briefly review Jack of Shadows and then take a look at Lord of Light to see if Zelazny, when I give him a second chance, can change my opinion of his work. So Jack of Shadows was written in 1971 and it's science fantasy, and I don't have a copy to show you because after I DNF'd it, I donated it to the library. The concept of Jack of Shadows is really cool though. It's about a planet which doesn't rotate, so half of the planet is always in darkness and the other half is always in light. The dark world is full of magic and monsters, and the light world has modern technology. The protagonist Jack is considered one of the most powerful beings on this planet. When he's in shadow, he gets superpowers. And he has some adventures on the dark side of the planet, and then we jump to him being a college professor on the light side. And that's as far as I can summarize the book, because I hard DNF'd this book at the halfway point when he was a college professor all of a sudden. So what is my big beef with Jack of Shadows? Well, I was pumped to read the book, actually. When I ordered off on the internet, I was actually in a big Jack Vance phase, and I was like, oh, this book by Roger Zelazny sounds so cool, I'm going to actually order it over another Jack Vance book. And part of it was the letdown of how cool the premise was to the execution of the premise. So I thought that Shadows was just a synonym for darkness, and that Jack would have all these cool powers when he was in the dark side of the world. But technically, according to this book, shadows aren't darkness. So there's got to be some light from a torch or a cigarette lighter or something to produce a little light to create a shadow. And since that often doesn't happen on the dark side of the planet, Jack is powerless. So even though he gets his power from shadows and he's in this world that's totally dark, he doesn't get to use his powers for most of the book. So we're repeatedly told that Jack is one of the most powerful beings on the planet, but we're not shown that. In fact, the first half of the book is Jack pretty much losing every encounter, or almost losing every encounter he has. And the discrepancy between being told that he's this amazing superhero and him basically getting whooped up on and almost failing everything for the whole half of the book, it just didn't add up to me, and I just didn't enjoy it. And then, without warning, he's a college professor. So I'm fine if books want to mix fantasy and modern elements. This was just such an abrupt, clumsy change that at that point I was barely able to invest myself in the world, that when all of a sudden it was like, yep, we're a college professor now. In the 1970s, I was like, okay, we're done here. So I just said, Jack of Shadows, this book is a mess. 0 stars, DNF'd it. So it's my understanding that Zelazny wrote Jack of Shadows without any rewrites. So maybe the guy was rushed or stressed or just having a bad day. I'll try to be open-minded, and let's take a second look at some of Zelazny's work with Lord of Light. Now, this was written in 1967, and it's science fantasy with religious themes. Synopsis of the book is that the first space colonists to another planet hoarded technology for themselves. They can resurrect themselves into new bodies, they have powerful weapons, they fly around the planet in a fighter jet, and they live in a paradise underneath a dome at the pole of the planet. They've become so full of themselves that they've taken on the names and likenesses of Hindu deities, and they've also developed some mutant powers that give them godlike abilities similar to what their Hindu gods might have for powers. The planet also has some really cool indigenous creatures like the mnemonic fire spirits that can inhabit bodies and radioactive sea creatures. The thing is, the gods don't let everyday people advance technologically. So, for example, there's a town in the book that invents the toilet and the printing press, and the gods show up and burn it down. They want to keep all the technology for themselves. One of the first colonists, Sam, has a problem with that oppression, though, and he takes on the likeness of the Buddha to oppose the other gods and be what's called an accelerationist, meaning sharing technology with the common folk. The book is a series of anecdotes about how Sam makes allies and enemies and eventually overthrows the gods and creates a more egalitarian society. So here's what I liked and didn't like about Lord of Light. What I liked was the premise of the book. I thought this was really interesting. Zelazny really seamlessly combines science and technology to explain these godlike powers. I thought that was cool. And many of the scenarios and set pieces were epic. Like when Sam goes into the Hellwell to free the demons, and all these over-the-top battles between these gods with their superpowers were really fun to read. It was really impressive. I also think that Zelazny is one of the best writers of dialogue I've ever read. His dialogue is snappy and sarcastic, witty. His prose is poetic and yet often efficient. In terms of what I didn't care for about the book was that it felt uneven to me. There were these moments when I was reading the book when I was like, oh man, this is a 5-star book for sure. And then there were other parts when I was like, oh man, this is just a bunch of people standing around having pompous speeches. This is a 2-star book for sure. And it just felt uneven. Part of that I think was because the book kind of seemed to spin its wheels. A lot of the anecdotes and vignettes didn't really advance the plot of the story. It was just more descriptions of cool stuff that happened. And the stuff that happened was cool. It just didn't exactly move things forward, in my opinion. Also, just want to point out that a lot of the characters in this book are chain smokers. Now, if you want to have a character in your book that smokes, that's fine. Do your thing. But so many characters in this book smoke. And they smoke so often. And they so often have dialogue about how relaxing and wonderful it is to smoke that the book started to feel like a product placement for some kind of a cigarette company that Roger Zelazny was running. It was pretty silly. But overall, though, I found this book enjoyable and inventive, even if it was kind of uneven, and I give it a solid 4 stars. So did Lord of Light change my opinion of Zelazny's work? I would say yes, for the better. I still find him to be an uneven author, both within and between books. So I don't know if I'm going to run out and load up on Roger Zelazny books. But when Zelazny is excellent, wow is he excellent. And if I'm out and about at a bookstore and I see some Roger Zelazny that catches my eye, I'd be open to giving it a read. A long time ago, the first book I wanted to try of his was actually Dilvish the Damned, and the library didn't have it, and they didn't have it in the interlibrary loan service. So, if I ever bump into a copy of that, I would give it a read. And I can definitely see why people laud Roger Zelazny so much on BookTube. He's definitely an inventive guy with some snappy, poetic prose. So, okay, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope you're doing well. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Oh, no. It's the Lord of Bats. Haha, that's right, Shadow Jack. And I know your weakness. That your powers only work in shadow, and total darkness is not a shadow, technically speaking. Please take my word for it as the author that Jack is a very powerful character with amazing powers. Oh, Buddha, what is the path to the cessation of all suffering? Verily, Sugata, the path to the cessation of suffering is the mild, smooth aroma of amber glow cigarettes, official smoke of Roger Zelazny.